welcome. Yes, as stated, I am the owner of an electric car, and in order to get one, I did a lot of research. I started looking at it seriously in 2019, and then I eventually got one ordered in 2020, and it arrived a year later in 2021. So over the course of all, I've learned a few things, and I was hoping to share them with folks and people that are interested in electric vehicles. People that already own one might be able to get a few tips from my experience. So we'll divide things into these categories. That's a picture of my car there. It's a Mustang Mach E 4X, which means it's four-wheel drive and has the extended range battery. And just a reminder, we're focusing on light passenger vehicles. So we're not going to get into buses or semi-trailers, even though those are quite large parts of the electric market. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. So why do people purchase electric cars? Well, there are two main reasons. People that want to save money and people that want to help the environment. Now, does purchasing an electric car actually accomplish these goals? We can point to some studies that say it does, and we'll highlight some of those later. Now, the pace of change here. You can see from any EV graph you look at that it's really kind of exponential growth, the kind of growth that would make even a COVID-19 growth chart jealous. In fact, 700 new EV models are promised by the year 2025. In this bar graph here, we've got China is the blue, dark and light blue. We've got Europe, the green, dark and light green. The US, the yellow and orange. And then there's other. So those are the three big markets.
What's PHEV?
Plug-in hybrid electric vehicle.
Also, the darker colors are the hybrids, the lighter colors are the 100% electrics?
Yes, so each part is made up of 100% electrics and hybrids, yeah. Culture shock. Will Rogers has a quote here, the good old horse and buggy days. Then you lived until you died and not until you were run over. So this is the kind of change that we haven't seen since then. And a lot of people feel about electric vehicles like Will Rogers felt about those newfangled horseless carriages. Things have been static for a long time when it comes to our transportation systems. But now we're in the middle of a huge change. And the impact of climate change has triggered a search for new ways to run vehicles. New ways of doing business as well. The gigafactory. Almost every day now we hear about these huge factories being built to produce batteries and electric vehicles. It's a new scale of manufacturing. One thing to note is it's not just cars and pickup trucks that are being affected. Delivery vans, airplanes, semi-trailer trucks, motorcycles, scooters, ATVs, bicycles are all undergoing this rush to invent electric-powered versions. In Norway, 87.7% of all new vehicle sales are electrics. 72% of those being fully electric. And while Norway is a leader, other countries are following close behind. A lot of countries like Denmark, Netherlands, France, Germany are approaching 20 to 30% of their new vehicle sales as electric vehicles. Which, if you look at the graph here, that would put them somewhere around 2018 if it was in Norway. So 3 years behind. And we fully expect them to continue this kind of growth just like Norway has. Norway is predicted to reach 100% of electric vehicle sales by April of next year. So let's have a look at the history of electric vehicles. Why is this being seen as a solution? Well, they've actually been around forever. Ever since the start of the horseless carriage phase, they were actually the most popular vehicle at the beginning. They were quiet, they didn't emit clouds of smoke, they didn't have a lot of maintenance, they were simple to build. As soon as the mass production of the lead-acid battery came along, electric cars became a big thing, and they actually had a bit of a golden age at the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s. But then more and better highways started being built, and range became an issue because people wanted to travel further. Electric vehicles couldn't compete. The price of gasoline came way down, and the gasoline car took over. Well, here's a few of the early ones. The Flocken Electrowagen from 1888. You can see that they're still using carriage wheels. Then the Thomas Parker electric car, 1895. This one from 1904, a German electric vehicle, still had the idea of a chauffeur on top and the people down below. But they have gone on to use pneumatic tires in that one. And here's an Edison electric car from 1913. So electric cars persisted even after gasoline cars took over most of the market. People kept coming up with a few of them from time to time. The Japanese had the Tama in 1947, probably inspired by gasoline shortages. East German Post Office fleet, they decided to electrify their entire fleet. There's a picture of it from 1953. There's a Henny kilowatt one that came out in 1961. Yes?
Do you have any idea how long East Germany kept, the post office kept those electric vehicles?
And no, not sure exactly how long they did that.
You'd think it would be quite an investment for them, and then they must have, for some reason, stopped it, and I just wondered how long.
Mm-hmm. No, I haven't looked into that. Well, this is one of the most famous predecessors, the GM EV1 from 1999. And then, of course, the Apollo 15 lunar rover. All Mars and lunar rovers are electric. So I have a couple of notes on the EV1 for you. You may be familiar with the story of the EV1, but for those that aren't, the EV1 was the first electric car produced and leased by General Motors, and it was in production from 96 to 1999. It was a purpose-designed electric vehicle and was designed to be so from the outset. The decision to produce one came after the California Air Resources Board passed a mandate that made the production and sale of zero-emissions vehicles in California a requirement. And so the EV1 was made available through a lease-only agreement in California cities. And while the customer reaction to the EV1 was positive, GM ended up crushing most of the cars, regardless of protesting customers, after the CARB regulations were weakened by a court case. All the cars on the road were taken back by GM under the terms of the lease. And almost all were crushed. About 40 of them were delivered to museums and educational institutes with their electric powertrains deactivated under the agreement that the cars were never to be reactivated or driven on the road. There is only one intact EV1 car that escaped destruction or deactivation, and it belongs to the Smithsonian Institution.
And that resulted in the movie, Who Killed the Electric Car?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They look like Step
Yeah. This brings us to our next category, models and availability. So what electric cars can you actually get? Well, as it turns out, not very many. In spite of all the hype, electric vehicles are very difficult to obtain. There's only two that you could actually get in Lethbridge, and that's the Mustang Mach E and the Chevrolet Bolt. For other cars, you'd have to travel to Calgary or perhaps Vancouver. Tesla is an example that's available in Calgary. And that means you'd have to get your warranty service there as well. And some EVs are not sold in Canada whatsoever. There is a note there that the Bolt is actually being discontinued by GM as well, because probably they've been experiencing some problems with battery fires. So they're moving on to different models. So this is my spreadsheet. When I was researching for electric cars, I put a bunch of them that interested me together on a spreadsheet and tried to test drive them if it was possible. Range is an important feature for lots of people, so I've got this sorted by range. And on here you can see the Tesla is the winner when it comes to range. Over in the last column, availability. Some of them on this chart are not actually available, just they were promised as becoming available soon, which is why I looked into them. The Rivian is the first pickup truck that has become available as an electric pickup truck. And they just started selling them to customers this month.
Which one is that? Sorry?
The Rivian.
Okay.
It's the first electric pickup truck on the market, but still only available in the US, not Canada. It's on the expensive side. I tried to look at ones that weren't too expensive either, so I'm not looking at, say, the Tesla Model S or the Tesla Model X, because both of those are over 100,000. There are a couple of ones, less expensive ones that are not on my list, like the Nissan Leaf and the Tesla Model 3. And that's because I did try them, and I found them to be a little small, not as comfortable as I might have liked, so they didn't make my spreadsheet. And one thing to note is right now there's a 100% tax write-off for electric vehicles. If you own a business and you're paying taxes until 2023, you could write off 100% of the electric vehicle cost. Now this is a list including many more vehicles than what was on my list. once again sorted by range. And now the Lucid comes at the top. The Lucid has just released their first vehicle for the regular customer to buy, and they've got a very excellent EPA rating.
You have to know those are miles, not kilometers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, as you can see from some of the prices on the previous slide, they're still expensive, electric vehicles. But Tesla is promising to release a Model 2 in 2023, and estimating the cost would be around $25,000.
US. 25,000 US.
Yes, US, yeah. So, let's take a look at some of the wild and wonderful electric vehicles that are actually out there. This is a Carver 2, which is a tilting electric tricycle that you could purchase in the Netherlands. The Moto FUV, which stands for Fun Utility Vehicle. And you can actually purchase this as another tricycle. You can actually purchase them in the US right now.
Are they roadworthy?
Yes. Yeah, and they can go highway speeds, about 100 kilometers an hour.
Thank you.
This is a Skoda Enyak, which is a Czechoslovakian vehicle that's quite popular in Europe. A Porsche Taycan, a sports car that's fully electrified by Porsche, and it's actually their most popular seller at the moment. As you can see, they've also released a few new colors for it recently, including the shocking pink. And there's a lot of Chinese companies that sell electric vehicles, and they're just starting to come into the European market now. Mostly they're just available in China. So this one, BYD is the name of the company, and this is their most popular seller, the Han. An electric Mini Cooper. You can actually buy those in Alberta. They have a limited range. A lot of old car names are coming back in this era of new inventions here. So a Spanish company bought the rights to Hispano Suiza, the name, and they are making electric cars. This is an electric hypercar. It's very fast, very expensive, and they're only making 50 of them.
Is that the one with solid-state batteries?
You've got me there. I'm not sure, but it could be.
I think it was. That's one of the reasons it's so expensive is
Oh, yeah.
solid-state.
This is the Lucid Air Dream. They just started selling these to consumers, and purchasing one of those in Canada would cost you about $214,000. This is another old name that's coming back, which if you're English you might recognize. The Morris van is historically popular van in England, and this is the new electric version of it.
Is this a current modern vehicle?
Yes, this is a brand new electric Morris van. This is the Polestar 2. These are available. What's that?
The one on the right.
Oh, yeah. These are available in Canada. You'd have to go to Vancouver to get one, but you can get them. This is the Rivian pickup truck that we mentioned earlier that they've just started selling. In the States, Rivian is quite a large company. They're backed by Amazon and Ford. And they have a deal with Amazon to supply them with electric delivery vans. Speaking of vans, Volkswagen is bringing back the iconic Volkswagen van. This is the Volkswagen Buzz, which they say will be available in 2023.
How much would that one, something like that cost? Little Buzz. It's okay.
It's hard to say because, of course, it's not available yet, but the vehicle that is available right now, the Volkswagen ID4, which is their first fully electric vehicle, is reasonably priced. So it's around the $50,000 Canadian range.
Thank you.
Which also means it qualifies for the government grant, Canadian federal government grant, which is $5,000. This is another Chinese company, XPeng, and they're modeled P7. And just a reminder that it's not all cars. There are a lot of motorcycles, for example, coming up. And I picked this one, which is a Verge hubless electric roadster from Finland. Because of the design of the rear wheel, which I found fascinating, the electric engine is actually mounted right on the wheel. And that brings us to design.
Can we see DeLorean?
Yes, exactly. Although, whereas the DeLorean had gull wings, Elon Musk is insisting these are falcon wings. So,
We're not going back to the future. Of course.
yeah, I'm not sure why he didn't go all the way to eagle wings, but there you are. But a lot of car companies are using the chance to develop new vehicles to experiment quite a bit with design.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Model X, by the way. So this is the Mustang Mach E frunk here on the left. And you can get a good size piece of luggage in there, but it also has a drain in the bottom, so you can fill it with ice and drinks if you want. And have a hood party. This is the inside of a Hyundai Ioniq 5, the latest electric vehicle from Hyundai. And that you can go right from the driver's side out the passenger door because there's nothing in the way here. There's no fixed console. They have a floating console that slides back and forth. And they've also used the generous interior space to make a super reclining seat with footrest. So if you happen to be stuck at a charger with nothing better to do, you can just kick back and relax. So when it comes to design, the two things that you're going to look to accommodate are the batteries and the electric engines. And engines are small and can be placed close to the wheels that they power. Single engine designs tend to place the engine on the axle, or two engine design, one on each axle. This Rivian chassis in the middle here has an engine at each wheel. That Rivian, with its four-engine design, can go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Now, because engines are small but mighty, you can keep throwing in extra ones. So Ford actually built a Mustang 1400 which has 7 engines, and it's called the 1400 because it generates 1400 horsepower. Engine and battery designs are still evolving. So this era for electric cars is like the period for computers when Moore's Law was reigning supreme, and you were going from a 286 to a 386 to a Pentium. The same pace of change is occurring now for electric cars. That GM engine there shows you how simple an electric engine design is. It's basically like 2 parts. And while a lot of the excitement in design is focused on batteries right now, electric engines are also a place where there's lots of room for change and improvement. Over on the far side, there's an airplane engine designed by Wright that they have just come up with. It's a 2 megawatt motor that produces the equivalent of 2,700 horsepower at high efficiency and low weight. So improvements like that are going to help make electric airplanes possible.
Well, Carver Air in Vancouver has their fully electric aircraft. I don't think it's in passenger service yet, but
Yes, they're already in use in small planes, yes. So, for small planes.
Right.
Yeah. Norway, for example, has mandated that regional airlines that are not going for long distances all have to be electric planes.
currently?
Yes, currently.
Oh,
Mm-hmm. It'd be great for, small hops like, say, here to Calgary or here to Edmonton, that kind of regional service. So solid-state batteries are one of the areas where people are working hard to develop new technology at the moment. And what's the difference? Well, a current battery has an electrolyte. It's either a gel or a solution. And it's subject to a lot of problems. You can get buildup on the anode and cathode, for example. And a lot of these problems are eliminated with the solid-state battery. You can get higher energy densities. It avoids the use of some of the dangerous and toxic materials you need for electrolytes. It's not flammable like the lithium-ion battery is. You can bang it with a hammer and it's not going to ignite. It charges faster, can go higher voltages, has longer life cycles, and it works better in extreme temperatures, especially cold temperatures.
So what's the holdup?
They've successfully made small ones fairly easily. It's scaling up that seems to be the problem. They have a few around, as Peter was mentioning, and there's, for example, electric buses that are using some solid-state batteries, but they still haven't reached being able to manufacture them in larger sizes at a reasonable cost. But so many people are working on it, it's coming. It's a picture of a solid-state battery versus the kind of battery cells used in cars like a Tesla. You may be surprised to learn that Tesla batteries are actually made up of very many small batteries, similar in size to your AA or AAA batteries. Yes?
So what kind of batteries are used on the Mars rover?
That's a good question. Not sure. I have not researched that.
Maybe they don't need as much batteries because they just use direct sunlight.
Well, you would want to combine it with solar power for sure to keep charging, right? But yeah, I would say it's probably not solid state because the technology is not perfected yet. So it's probably cylindrical batteries of some kind. That's a peek at the inside of a Tesla battery pack. And one of the reasons they use many small batteries instead of one giant battery is the thermal runaway problem that you can have with lithium-ion batteries. It's much less if the battery is small.
Bailey, call 3954, please. Bailey, 3954.
Tesla is currently introducing the use of a larger cylindrical battery, which it says will increase the range of its vehicles by 16%. However, that cell will probably not be available in sufficient volumes until 2023. Battery placement. You may know from hybrid vehicles that a lot of times batteries were in the trunk or under the seat. Some of the older designs, like the Chevy Bolt, still have a section that's raised up in the rear there. But most people are going to the skateboard style of battery. Like this company, from Israel. Their batteries are all skateboard designs, and they're also designed to be modular so that you can basically clip any kind of car on top of the battery that you want. You could put a sedan, you could put a van. All the base components are there, and you can just design the exterior components.
Well, Tom, with the skateboard design, would you be able to then just keep your car and get the new skateboard with the new batteries when your batteries run out, when your batteries die?
If people adopt this kind of modular building technology, sure, that's quite possible. I can sense a bit of reluctance from manufacturers, so they like to have their own proprietary designs. So whether that will become widespread or not is debatable. Another recent idea is structural batteries, where you make the car body itself the battery, and then you don't have to have this large, bulky battery block. You're using the structure that's already there for two purposes. So that's an ongoing research project, and that would be a form of solid-state battery.
So what happens if somebody in the parking lot opens their door and snacks your battery? Eh?
Well, if it's solid state, nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So while cable charging dominates in North America, a lot of companies like NIO Automobiles in China offer a different approach, and they use swappable batteries. It's quite popular with things like scooters and motorcycles. A NIO power swap only takes 3 minutes to perform, and it also checks over your car and battery while it's doing it to keep them both in the best shape. Got a little video here of how that works. I thought it might be interesting.
If you wear glasses or contacts, you must see this. An award-winning doctor reveals an astonishing, natural...
Now the car backs itself in at the touch of a button, so you don't have to worry about backing in. That brings us to our next topic, charging. So let's talk a bit about how we charge mostly around here in North America, and that's cable charging. So there are different levels of car charging available, and you'll hear the terms level 1, level 2, and level 3 charging. Level 1 means the standard 120 volt plug that you have on the wall on your house. Level 2 is connecting to a larger outlet. So that's the 240 volt style of outlet that you have for your dryer or your stove. This is the typical kind of outlet that you would put in your garage or on the wall of your house to charge your EV. And level 3 refers to DC fast chargers. Those are the ones that you find in public places, and they're capable of charging at very high speeds, but they need large industrial electrical supply. So just to give you an idea of charging speeds, a level 1 outlet, the standard plug at your home, would take 20 to 40 hours to charge your car. A level 2 outlet, which you might have in your garage, would take 12 hours. And a level 3 DC fast charger, like a Tesla supercharger, would take 25 minutes to charge your average Tesla from a zero battery.
On a level 3 charger, just out of curiosity, what sort of voltages and averages are you using?
Well, I tend to talk in terms of kilowatts when you're talking level 3 chargers. So, for example, my Mustang Mach E charges at home on my home charger at 11.5 kilowatts. And it can charge on a DC fast charger at 150 kilowatts.
Okay.
So, and that is limited by the car. Some cars could go even higher, and also by the kind of public charger that you're dealing with, because they all have different ratings. Some are fast, some are not so fast. So you need to learn a bit about chargers when you're going on a road trip, and we'll talk about that in a moment. At home, in addition to just installing the outlet, you have to install a charger, but it's not really a charger, it's an electric vehicle supply equipment piece. The actual charger is inside your car, and that's what converts AC power to DC power. So everyone calls the EVSEs chargers, so I'll do the same. Now there's some very simple ones and more complex ones. This one, for example, the juice box has a wireless connection. You can control it with your phone, turn it on and off remotely, that sort of thing. And the charging system inside electric vehicles is different too. For example, some of the latest ones like the Porsche Taycan and the Hyundai Ioniq 5 have 800 volt interior architectures, which means they can receive DC charging of up to 350 kilowatts, which would allow them to charge their batteries in 17 minutes. Otherwise, they say it would be about 46 to 56 minutes. Typically, when I recharge my car at a public charger, it takes me about 45 minutes. So the stock of EV chargers is also going up exponentially, just like the stock of electric cars. And we expect it to keep going up. This is the chart only up to 2020. I'm sure 2021 is another larger bar. So while it's going up steadily, more chargers are going to be needed as EVs start to travel widely. There's a lot of underserved areas still in remoter areas of the country. And more connection points are going to be needed at each charging station. A lot of charging stations only have one plug-in, maybe two. If you get to one of those and somebody's already using it, that might mean a 45-minute wait before you can use it yourself. Now, we're lucky in southern Alberta that some visionary people have gone around the region and proactively installed a good number of public car chargers, making this region a great place to visit in an EV or to own one. And the different charging chains operating around here are Flow, ChargePoint, Electrify Canada, and Petro-Canada. There's a Flow station downtown by Chapters. There's a ChargePoint station at the Volkswagen dealership on Highway 3. So if you have a friend visiting in an EV, you could send them to one of those.
Flow out by the corner on the Y on the west side is a flow charge station.
Yes, level 2, right?
I think it's got two different speeds.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
On your chart here, Tom,
Yes.
do you have any indication how much of each of these bars, like China, Europe, US, and the rest of the world, what percentage of each is actually, the electricity is created by solar versus by oil or fossil fuels?
Not on this graph, but you will get a look at that in one of the graphs coming up. So Alberta and BC have some good charging networks. What we're looking at here, the brown pins are the DC fast chargers, level 3, and green are level 2. So when you're on a road trip, you're looking for the brown ones. And depending on what kind of a electric vehicle you have, you need to know what kind of plug you want to plug into. So mine is a CCS for level 3, or a J1772 for level 2. Or I can also use just a NEMA outlet because my car came with a mobile charging cable that I could plug into one of those. Some remote areas don't have the greatest access, and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, unfortunately, are not well served. So here is the entirety of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where you can see the chargers are along Highway 1, aside from one in Dauphin and one in Saskatoon. And Saskatchewan has just implemented a tax on electric vehicles starting October 1st, in an attempt, I would say, to suppress their use. Now, the most common rate that you'll find for public chargers is 50 kilowatts. All the Flow stations, for example, are 50 kilowatts. Some of them will operate at a higher rate. Petro-Canada operates at a higher rate, but I have never successfully charged at a Petro-Canada station. Their chargers always throw errors or disconnect, and so they're not quite there yet when it comes to the technology for the Mustang, anyway. Now, Electrify Canada also charges at a higher rate, and I was able to try one of those chargers in Calgary. There are only 2 in all of Alberta, one in Canmore and one in Calgary. And it was able to charge my vehicle at a maximum rate of 150 kilowatts. And it was very fast. We parked, it's in a mall along the Deerfoot. I parked the car, walked over to a restaurant to have breakfast. I sat down and checked my phone, and the car was almost finished charging. So I walked back across, we ordered food, I walked back across the parking lot and drove closer. It was finished charging before my food came, so that was a great experience. Now they started building out from Vancouver, the Electrify Canada people. So they may keep building. They're also quite common, I understand, in Quebec.
So do you have like a electric card, like a UFA, you know, where you go place to place?
It's good, yes. It's good to know each network would have its own payment systems, for example. And so, for example, the Flow network, which is most common around here, you either have to have a special card from Flow to start the charging process, or you have to have an app from them so that you can start it online. So if your phone is dead, or there's no cell coverage where you're charging, and you don't have the card, basically you can't start a charging session. Which is why I made sure I got the... Yes, prepay. It's a prepay card. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so other networks have different setups. The ChargePoint has a card as well that you can prepay. So just because my cell phone service hasn't always been the greatest, when I'm out on the road, I've tried to sign up for some of these things in advance so I don't get stuck in a dead zone or with a dead phone or whatever.
Tom, would you agree with me that these charging stations are little money makers, like the ATM machines? Whoever owns all these charging stations, once they're installed and they're hooked up and they're running, and you just you have to go there to charge your car, you pay a fee, you pay like a service rate for each time, and that goes directly to the owners of these stations. So the more they're used, the more money the owner of the station makes.
Well, of course, they'll have electric bills, but yeah. I imagine you can set the fee to what you want. So your profit margin can be manipulated that way. It certainly will attract people. So I'd recommend the Galt Museum get themselves a car charger.
Yes, there's several electric vehicles parked here right now.
There we go. We could be charging, yes. Important. Range is variable. Well, it's the same with a gas vehicle, but maybe you're more aware of it when you're in an electric vehicle. I'm certainly prompted to have range anxiety more because the display on the car is saying, you have only 80% left, only 70, only 60%. When it was just a gas gauge, it was the same thing, but I didn't really notice it because they weren't broadcasting it on the screen. I just, when it got low, I said, oh, time to look. But, you know, if you're going up a mountain, driving at higher speeds, or if the weather is too hot or too cold, it will affect your range. You know, speed can actually be quite significant. Going 120 kilometers instead of 100 does make a fair difference in range. I did see some figures on that recently, and it was quite high. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I was thinking it was close to 20% difference. Running a heater in the winter draws a lot of power, and it's much worse than running air conditioning in the summer. Resistive heaters are quite bad for your range, so that's why if you're looking for an EV, it's good to get one with a heat pump. The Tesla originally came out without a heat pump, but now they've added one. And the Mustang so far does not have one, but I imagine they would add it in the future. It does increase your range in winter driving. I made a note before that you could charge your car from your regular wall plug. Not in the winter, if it's 20 below, all you'd be doing is keeping your battery status quo. keeping it from losing charge. So here's a winter driving tip. Charging your car actually heats the battery. So if you charge just before you go, you're going to have a preconditioned battery. Also, a lot of cars have software that allow you to precondition the interior of the car. Doing that would also warm up your battery. This brings us to a new topic, the environment and solar power. Because you're increasing your electricity use, solar power combined with the EV is really desirable. Another reason is that, as you can see from this solar map here, Lethbridge is one of the best places in North America for solar power. If you add solar power to a house in Lethbridge, the city caps the amount of panels you can have based on your electricity usage. But if you have an EV, you can put on up to the maximum allowed for a residence, which is just less than 10 kilowatts. And because Alberta allows you to get credit for power you generate when you feed it into the grid, this is really helpful for your electricity grid, or electricity bills, rather. And of course, it guarantees the power source for your EV is 100% renewable energy. Yeah.
It's kind of outside what this presentation is, but do you know roughly how much it would cost to put solar panels on your home? Like for up to the maximum that City of Lethbridge allows?
It all depends on your home's location, its orientation to the sun, that sort of thing. People do an evaluation if you're considering and tell you how many panels you might need. Rule of thumb is it's around $1,000 per solar panel to install a system. And the federal government currently is providing $5,000 rebate to people who install solar panels. And here's that graph I mentioned, Bev, where you can see a bit about power sources. This was put out by Polestar, which is part of Volvo, which is part of Geely, another Chinese company. And they've compared one of their petrol vehicles to their electric vehicles. And the gray bar is the amount of carbon footprint you generate by production and end-of-life recycling. And the orange is generated by usage. And you can see that the different kinds of power here are represented. Global being the dirtiest, which is probably equivalent to coal power in a lot of countries. EU having a larger percentage of renewable energy. And wind or solar, something like that, 100% renewable. So if you had renewable energy powering your car, you'd be less than half of the carbon footprint of a comparable ICE vehicle, which is internal combustion engine vehicle. So at the simplest level, not burning carbon in your car means you're not putting pollutants into the air, which is great. But a lot of people have questions about, is it really environmentally sustainable over the, when you consider the whole manufacturing process and life of the car? Are there issues with the following: building cars and batteries, using electricity supply from dirty sources, and recycling the batteries? So we saw from the previous chart that it doesn't take a lot of time to overcome that. You're looking at a little more carbon footprint from the manufacturing because you have to build the battery, which is a fairly major piece. But a Tesla Model 3, for example, would have to be driven 13,500 miles before it became cleaner than a fossil fuel powered car. But if you were using a power grid in Norway, it would only be 8,400 miles. Or if you were powering it from your own solar panels, even less.
That's what we do.
So even if you're using the dirtiest energy sources, 100% coal power for your electricity grid, electric vehicles are still cleaner than fossil fuel powered vehicles. And battery recycling is actually quite robust and growing. And a matter of fact, there's a lot of competition for used batteries. Tesla's co-founder, J.B. Straubel, recently quit to start a new company that will just recycle EV batteries and sell the components back to manufacturers. It's called Redwood Materials. Volkswagen recently announced a lease-only plan for used electric vehicles because they want to keep the batteries at vehicle end of life. There's a link there for a good video to check out some of these issues. We're not going to watch it because it takes 14 minutes, but if you're interested, I can send you the link. So in 2020, they determined that over the lifetime of the vehicle, it's actually cheaper to have an electric car than it is an ICE car. And a lot of this is due to, well, we'll see a bit on the next slide of some of the maintenance costs, for example, are much less with an electric car. Because of government action on climate, a shift by investors is fueling titanic investments. And we can thank policies like the bans on new ICE car sales that have been implemented by countries such as Canada, Japan, the UK, state of New York, California, all promising to phase out fossil fuel cars by 2035. And there's additional policies like rebates that might be available from all levels of government in your area. So here's a look at where maintenance costs are less for EVs. And as you can guess, a lot of that comes from not having an internal combustion engine. One of the things to highlight is that a lot of electric vehicles use one-pedal driving, which means that if you take your foot off the accelerator, the car stops by itself using regenerative braking. So you're not even using the disc brakes on the car, which saves them, and they're going to last a lot longer. On the other hand, when you take off an electric car, the torque tends to burn some rubber. So electric cars are all very zippy because you've got instant torque. So you're going to run through tires faster. And some tire companies are now introducing tires specifically designed for electric vehicles with different rubber compounds that won't wear away as quickly. So one final thought for you then. The key to navigating this disruptive technology and this giant change is managing change. Whether you're a business, a government, an entire economy, or an individual. The change is coming. So you may want to plan ahead. You may want leaders that are going to plan ahead. You may want to put that outlet in your garage if you're building a garage, or consider getting a heated garage to help your range in the winter. Things like that. Did you have a question?
You mentioned earlier in the talk that General Motors in the States, they had this a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, where they took back all their electric cars and wouldn't let the customers have them back, lease them back.
Mm-hmm.
Why did General Motors do that? And is there any guarantee that that's not going to happen?
Well, there's a debate about that, and you know, some people say that it's because they wanted to promote fossil fuel cars over electric cars. Of course, they're not saying, but well, that's a problem if it's a lease-only program, like the General Motors program was. But all the cars we looked at, for the most part today, are cars that you purchase outright, so it shouldn't be an issue. The Volkswagen program that I mentioned a moment ago was for their used vehicles, not for new vehicles, where they want to do the used vehicles lease only, so that they can take back the batteries and recycle them.
But surely also the electric car has just become too multifaceted. It's no longer controlled by one company like GM. In all the countries, so in China was huge and so on.
But there was still a reason GM decided to do that, and I mean, these were perfectly good cars. There was a documentary on it, and they just so much fun, and the people could not have them back, and they were willing to take them and pay for them for the next 3 years. But GM made the decision no more. Like, what was that about? It just doesn't make sense. Financially, it didn't make sense.
Yeah, the building.
Question?
You mentioned Canada wants all electric cars in the future, but Saskatchewan is taxing them. Like, what's going on there? Saskatchewan thing?
Yeah, well, that's provincial government versus federal government, yeah.
Yeah, but isn't part of the reason for the taxing by Saskatchewan is so that even the electric cars owners pay their share for the infrastructure for road maintenance as the ICE cars, the internal combustion engine cars do with their fuel taxes, part of the fuel taxes.
Supposedly, but there's only 600 electric cars in Saskatchewan, so
far, yeah.
And I'm sure that there's a lot of government fees on getting your electricity, for example, that if you've noticed on your electric bill, all these distribution and transmission fees. So I suspect we're already paying a lot of taxes on the electricity. Maybe they're not using it directly for roads, but yeah.
If you had solar panels and you charged your EV with the solar panels, you wouldn't be paying any infrastructure taxes, right? And then I can understand why a government would say, well, our roads are going to start wearing out in 10 years. We have to maintain them somehow, right? So I think that is going to be one of those change things you were talking about, where we need good leadership to help us, instead of putting the taxes or the maintenance on fuel, on gasoline or diesel, somehow we have to get money, the government needs to get money for maintenance from electric car vehicles, right?
Or from my property taxes, like they already do. But, and that only applies if you have a battery system. Because I'm using the grid, I am still paying all those fees. I'm using the grid to store my electricity with my solar panels. I have solar panels on my house as well. So I still pay all the distribution and transmission fees because I'm using the grid as my battery storage, basically. If I had my own battery system, then I could be totally divorced from the grid.
Except that you couldn't get insurance, and the city would be having a fit because you don't have insurance if you're totally off the grid.
You mean home insurance? Or
yeah,
car insurance? Or?
Mark and Joan Worthaba have everything's off the grid, except they have to be hooked into the city grid, or like they can't get any services if they're not. So even though they shouldn't be paying anything because they've got everything sustainable, they do because they can't get insurance and they can't get city services if they're not on the grid.
So they won't pick up your garbage if you're not on the grid?
Well, I don't know if they do that, but that's what Joan told me.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, you know, as more and more people get these home systems, these things will change.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes?
just wondering how many electric vehicles are in Alberta.
That's a good question. I haven't looked up that statistic, but I am seeing a lot more on the roads than I used to, so they're coming. Teslas especially have taken the lead, well, just like everywhere, because they were the first company to actually successfully do it. So yeah, it's growing all the time.
What do you think people are buying them in
Oh, yes, yeah.
And Lethbridge too.
Oh, I had understood that right at the beginning, I didn't think you could get one in Lethbridge.
Oh, well, no, you'd have to buy it in Calgary, that's right. Yeah. And I asked them about servicing a Tesla. They also said, yes, you'd have to bring it to Calgary. Yes.
I was very intrigued to see the the TV commercials for the truck, the Ford 150.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
You didn't mention it here, but it just seems like that's the most popular truck, that particular.
A little plug for Ford there.
But
Yeah.
it's a very popular truck, and that they've now got one that's electric. And they've still got the macho image, you know, the cowboy with the cowboy hat and the macho swagger. Going to electric, it just seemed to me that that was an incredible leap for the whole electrification of cars. You can have a truck and you can still be a man, even if you're not putting gasoline into it. That was one thing I wanted to say. The other is I just heard today that one of the cities in China, and I'm not sure of the name, Sichuan, perhaps something like that, all of their buses are electric. And they've now set up one of these huge manufacturing plants to manufacture electric buses for all of China.
China's way ahead on electric buses, yeah. They have the most worldwide, yeah.
Also way ahead on coal.
Well, yeah, they still have those energy demands that require the coal as well. So it'll be difficult for them to make the move to 100% renewables. Well, just like it is for everybody else, right? Not that it can't be done. You know, I heard somebody say the other day that, oh, we should go with hydrogen because you can ship hydrogen back and forth across the ocean on ships, and you can't do that with electricity. And then the day after that, I heard that they're building an electric cable to go from Morocco to the UK to connect them and send electricity to the United Kingdom. So, well, I guess we didn't need the ship after all. But yes, just rapid change going on at the moment. So it's a really interesting time. And if anyone wants to take a look afterwards at the Mach E, it's parked outside here, so we could go and have a look at it.